She wasn't supposed to mean anything to him. Just a name on a file, another transaction in a carefully controlled life. A young woman hired to carry his late wife's frozen embryo. But the day he opened the sealed letter she left behind, the world didn't just shift, it cracked open. He read it in the quiet of his home office, the envelope trembling in his hand. And when he finished, the billionaire who'd never been seen crying in public collapsed to the floor, completely undone. What could a poor girl, a total stranger, possibly write that would break a man who'd already lost everything? In this story, you'll witness an emotionally charged journey of love, grief, and quiet sacrifice. You'll meet her, a young woman named Emily, barely surviving paycheck to paycheck. You'll meet him, Jonathan Pierce, a powerful CEO still grieving the only woman he ever loved. And you'll see how one unexpected agreement slowly transformed into something no one saw coming. There are moments that will test your heart, challenge your assumptions, and maybe even change how you see life, loss, and legacy. Pay close attention. There's a brief quiz at the end asking, how many times was Jonathan Pierce mentioned in this story? It's just for fun. If you answer correctly within the first 7 days after this story is posted, your name might appear in our shoutout post. Even if you're watching late, go ahead and answer. We read every comment, and you might get a surprise shoutout anyway. Before we dive in, if this story moves you, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and if you haven't already, hit like, subscribe now, and turn on the bell to keep the stories coming your way. Jonathan Pierce didn't believe in second chances, not in business, not in love, and certainly not in life. His penthouse office on the 47th floor of the Pierce Global building was always spotless, cold marble, chrome accents, and a view that swallowed the New York skyline. But none of it felt like anything since Rachel, his wife, passed away from a rare autoimmune disease 2 years prior. Before she died, they froze embryos. "Just in case," she'd whispered with a trembling smile, her hands barely strong enough to hold his. But after her passing, those embryos became more of a ghost than a gift, a haunting memory Jonathan locked away, until he met Emily. She walked into the fertility agency wearing faded jeans and a thrift store coat, her shoulders hunched but eyes steady, a 24-year-old waitress from Albany who hadn't had a break in years. Her father had passed. Her mother was in assisted care. She was barely getting by. But what stood out wasn't her struggle. It was her letter. Surrogates could submit a short note for intended parents. Emily's was handwritten, carefully worded, honest. She didn't want pity. She wanted purpose. Jonathan didn't know why, but something in that letter made him circle her name. He never meant to meet her, never planned to get involved. But the clinic insisted on one face-to-face, a legal formality. They met in a quiet, glass-walled room, both unsure what to say. Emily didn't flatter him, didn't ask questions about his empire. She only asked one thing. "If this child is born, will it know who its mother was?" Jonathan had no answer. Still, the contract was signed. And over the next 8 months, Emily's life changed, but not in the way she'd expected. Every week, a car picked her up from her apartment and drove her to the best prenatal care Manhattan had to offer. Organic meals arrived at her door. She was told not to worry about bills. Jonathan's team handled it all. But it wasn't the money that changed her. It was the small moments, like the music box she found on her bedside table one night, a soft waltz, the same melody Rachel used to hum, or the handwritten note left in the nursery Jonathan had built in one of his guest houses. "Thank you for giving her dream a heartbeat." Emily never met Rachel, but she started to feel her, and Jonathan, the man who never left meetings early, started showing up at doctor's appointments, at baby name discussions, and slowly at Sunday mornings in the guest house kitchen, offering pancakes like an awkward uncle. But Emily knew her place. She was a bridge, not family. A chapter, not the story. When she went into labor 3 weeks early, it was Jonathan who paced the hospital floor, who held her hand when the pain kicked in, who cried openly when the baby girl took her first breath. They named her Hope. Emily asked to hold her, once, just once. Jonathan didn't hesitate. And when Emily handed Hope back, she smiled, nodded, and quietly asked the nurse for a pen and envelope. The letter arrived 2 days later. Sealed, no return address, the handwriting delicate, clearly Emily's. Jonathan opened it after Hope's first night home, alone beside the fireplace in the nursery Rachel once dreamed of. It read, "Dear Jonathan, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you'll throw it away. That's okay. But I wanted you to know I didn't do this for money or comfort or even Rachel, though I feel I've known her. I did it because I believe some souls are meant to finish what others started. You may never think of me again, and I wouldn't blame you. But when Hope grows up and asks why she feels like someone's always watching over her, tell her that's just love lingering. I'll be okay, I promise, and I hope so will you." There was no signature, just a PS. Please make sure she always knows her mother's name was Rachel. Jonathan folded the letter slowly, holding it like it was made of glass. His empire was built on logic, power, precision. But that night, none of that mattered. The only thing he could hear was the heartbeat of a girl named Emily, who'd given his daughter life, and him a second chance. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. By morning, Jonathan had called in all his assistants, not to schedule meetings, but to find Emily. Quietly, discreetly. No legal follow-ups, no press trails, just find her. He told himself it was for Hope, that she should know the woman who gave her life, even if from a distance. But the truth wasn't that noble. The truth was, Emily had left a hole wider than he expected, and Jonathan Pierce, billionaire, could not tolerate unanswered questions. Emily wasn't easy to find. She'd left Albany, closed her bank account, declined the post-surrogacy therapy sessions the clinic offered. All that remained was a P.O. box address that hadn't been checked in weeks. His team tracked down a waitress job in Buffalo she held briefly under a fake last name. Gone now. No trace. It was like she'd vanished with the intent of being forgotten. Jonathan hated that. In business, every variable had a resolution. Emily, somehow, had slipped the algorithm. Still, weeks passed, then months. Hope grew. First smiles, first babbles, the soft curve of her mother's cheekbones becoming visible with every passing day. And yet, Jonathan couldn't shake it. Rachel's eyes, Emily's letter, the sense that he was raising a daughter born between two ghosts, one he had loved, and one he had never known, but could not stop thinking about. One evening, around Hope's first birthday, his housekeeper, Irene, tapped on his office door. "I found something," she said gently, holding a box. It was from the guest house, forgotten in the back of a closet. "It had her handwriting," she added. "I thought you should see it." Jonathan stared at the dusty cardboard like it might explode. Inside were simple things: a copy of Charlotte's Web, 2 prenatal vitamins wrapped in tissue, a drawing Hope would never see, a stick figure family of 3, labeled you, me, and her. And at the bottom, folded tightly, was a hospital release form. It was signed not by Emily, but Emily Whitmore. Jonathan froze. He knew that name. Years ago, when Rachel had been battling her illness, she created a scholarship for underprivileged girls, the Whitmore Women's Fund. He remembered the gala, the teary-eyed recipients. One girl had stayed behind to say thank you. She couldn't have been older than 16. She wore a wrinkled navy dress 2 sizes too big and had stumbled over her words. But she'd looked Rachel in the eye and said, "You don't know me, but you just changed my life." Jonathan hadn't remembered her face. But now, he could almost hear her voice. Emily hadn't been a stranger. Not really. The realization cut deeper than he expected. She'd known Rachel, even if briefly. Perhaps that's why she agreed to be the surrogate. Maybe Rachel had meant more to her than Jonathan ever knew. He felt a strange bitterness crawl into his chest. Was that why she did it? Out of some misplaced gratitude? Out of obligation? Hope was nearly walking now, chubby hands reaching toward the light, a wobbly wonder that both filled his chest and cracked it wide open. He wanted answers. 3 months later, he got one. A letter. No envelope. Just dropped at the security desk in his office with the name Pierce scrawled in black ink. His assistant assumed it was a vendor. She didn't recognize the handwriting, but Jonathan did. Inside, only a single line. "Please stop looking for me." That was it. No return address, no explanation. But it shattered something in him. Not because of its coldness, but because it was written in the same looping, careful script he saw in Hope's bedtime storybook every night. She hadn't forgotten him. She was watching, somewhere, and she wanted to stay gone. Jonathan never told anyone about the note, not even Irene, not his board, not his therapist. Instead, he built higher walls. He buried himself in company expansion plans, placed Hope in a private daycare on the first floor of the Pierce Global building so he could keep her close without being too present. His smiles became tighter, his decisions sharper. To the outside world, Jonathan Pierce was a man reborn by fatherhood. But inside, he was haunted. Because every time Hope reached for him with arms full of giggles, he saw 2 women behind her, one he buried and one who had buried herself. On Hope's 2nd birthday, Jonathan found himself in the guest house again. Alone. The house had been converted into a cozy play space for Hope and her nanny, but something still lingered in the walls, memories that hadn't even been made. Jonathan stood near the window, staring out at the small garden Rachel once dreamed of planting. A soft knock startled him. He turned. A woman stood in the doorway. No security alert, no voice call, just her. Emily, older, thinner, her hair pulled back in a low braid, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. She held nothing in her hands, no cake, no gifts, no apology, just a quiet presence. Jonathan said nothing. Emily broke the silence. "I heard she's walking now." He nodded, unsure if he was breathing. "She says a few words," he added. "Does she know?" "That you exist?" he asked. "Yes, but not how." Emily smiled faintly, like that answer hurt and healed her all at once. She stepped inside. Every footfall sounded like thunder in Jonathan's head. "I don't want anything," she said gently. "I just wanted to see her, from a distance, I promise." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Why now?" "I needed time to be someone again," she said. "Not just a surrogate, not just part of your story." "You were more than that," he said, and it came out angrier than he meant. Emily paused. "Were I? Because when I left, no one stopped me." Jonathan blinked. The room thickened. She looked toward the nursery. The door was closed, soft lullaby music playing from inside. "You named her Hope," Emily said, her voice cracking for the first time. "That was Rachel's favorite word." Jonathan stepped forward. "How did you know that?" Emily didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her tote and pulled out something small, a child's pacifier, still in its package. The same kind from the hospital room 2 years ago. She placed it on the windowsill. "Happy birthday," she whispered. Then she turned to leave. Jonathan stood frozen. He could have stopped her, called her name, begged her to stay, or at least explain. But he didn't, because in that moment, he realized something far worse than not knowing her. She had never expected to be known. As the door clicked shut behind her, Jonathan felt Hope's cry echo down the hall. He turned toward the nursery, but for a long moment, he didn't move. On the windowsill, the pacifier glinted in the late afternoon sun. Beside it, tucked just under the edge, was a second note. He hadn't seen her place it. It read, "If she ever needs me, tell her I was brave enough to walk away, even when it broke me." Jonathan stood frozen, his hand hovering above the note as if it might vanish with a single breath. That night, sleep never came. Instead, he sat in the nursery, hope curled gently against his chest. Her small breath was warm and rhythmic, a soft anchor in the stillness of the house. It was too quiet. For the first time in months, Jonathan whispered a truth he hadn't let himself face. He missed her, not Rachel, Emily. He missed the quiet way she hummed in the hallway, the way her hands instinctively cradled her pregnant belly with reverence, like she was holding something sacred. He missed her stillness, her grace, the way she never asked for space, but filled it with presence. Maybe that's why he let her go so easily, because she never asked to stay. In the weeks after her departure, Jonathan began to unravel, not outwardly, not at first. But something deep inside shifted. He started canceling meetings, ignoring calls. He skipped the quarterly shareholder address, a first in the company's history. The press whispered about burnout. The board whispered about replacement. But no one said it to his face, except Dana. His sister arrived unannounced one Sunday morning, walking in like she still had keys to his old life. "You look terrible," she said, tossing her purse onto the counter. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair. "Morning to you too." Dana crossed her arms. "Cut the crap. What's going on?" "I'm tired." "No," she said. "You're haunted. That's different." He poured black coffee, hoping the bitterness might wake him up. "Just drop it, Dana." But Dana had never dropped anything in her life. "I know about her," she said, eyes locked. "Emily." He flinched, just barely, but it was enough. "She came to me," Dana continued, "before she signed anything. She asked questions about the family, about you. I didn't say anything back then because I didn't think it mattered." Jonathan stared at her. She what? "She wanted to make sure hope would be raised by someone who understood grief," Dana said softly. "Someone who wouldn't erase the woman who gave her life." Jonathan looked down at his coffee like it held answers. "She said that?" he murmured. Dana nodded. "And now you're unraveling because she left. But John, she was never yours to keep. That wasn't the deal. You knew that." Jonathan gripped the edge of the counter. "What if I wanted her to stay?" Dana didn't reply. She didn't need to. That week, Jonathan found himself in the garden behind the guest house. Rachel's garden, now Hope's tiny kingdom. He sat beside the stubborn rose bush that never bloomed right. Rachel had once said it needed more patience, more sun. From his pocket, he pulled a folded letter. Emily's second note, the one she left behind. He traced the final line with his fingertip. Brave enough to walk away, even when it broke her. And then a thought struck him. You don't write something like that unless some part of you wants to be found. Jonathan didn't tell anyone, not Dana, not even Irene. He booked a private flight under a different name. The destination, Ithaca, New York. The only place ever listed on Emily's old scholarship records. A retired college counselor remembered her. "Quiet girl," she said. "Didn't want to take up space, but brilliant." "Do you know where she went?" Jonathan asked. "She took a job at a library in Monticello," the woman replied, "but that was months ago." Monticello was small, unassuming, the kind of place where the post office and the school district ran the town. The library was a brick building with ivy creeping up one side. Inside, he showed a vague description, no name. "Sounds like Emmy," the clerk said. "She left a few weeks back. Gave me this in case anyone ever asked." It was a postcard, an image of a serene gray-blue lake. On the back, a handwritten note, Riverside Retreat, Room 14. Jonathan drove straight there. The place was modest, more like a quiet retreat center than a resort. A row of wooden cabins overlooked the water. Room 14 was near the edge. He knocked, once, then twice. No answer. He turned to leave when the door opened. Emily stood barefoot in the doorway, wearing a sweater that slid off one shoulder. She looked exhausted, but not surprised. "You found me," she said. Jonathan nodded. Words caught in his throat. "Do you want to come in?" she asked gently. Inside, the space was simple. A kettle hissed. The air smelled faintly of tea and something older. Books, perhaps. It felt still. "I didn't think you'd look," Emily said, curling into a chair. "I didn't think I'd need to," he replied, sitting across from her. She gave a faint smile. "But you did." He hesitated. "Why didn't you say goodbye?" She looked out the window. "Because if I did, I might have stayed. And that wasn't what I signed up for." "You think Hope doesn't deserve to know you?" "She deserves stability, not to be split between the man raising her and the woman who walked away." "She wouldn't be split," he insisted. Emily turned to him, her eyes steady. "Wouldn't she?" Jonathan looked down, ashamed. It wasn't just about Hope. It was about the way he'd kept her at a distance, never letting her become more than the role she'd been assigned. And when she slipped away, he let her, because admitting he needed her terrified him. The kettle whistled, but neither of them moved. Finally, he stood. "I don't want to lose you again." "You never really had me," she whispered. But as she walked him to the door, their hands brushed, and this time, she didn't pull away. Outside, the night was cool. Jonathan turned back to her. "I don't know what to do with this," he confessed. "Neither do I," she admitted. Then she pressed something small into his palm. "A key. To room 14, she said. "Just in case you ever stop being afraid of what it means." Sometimes love doesn't arrive in the ways we expect. It doesn't always knock loudly or announce itself with promises. Sometimes it simply leaves a key. Jonathan thought he was hiring a surrogate. Emily thought she was walking away from a chapter, but maybe, just maybe, they were always meant to meet at the intersection of heartbreak and healing, not to fix each other, but to remind each other what real connection feels like when no one is pretending. And now, one quiet room, one soft key, holds the question neither of them is ready to answer. What if the ending they were afraid of is actually the beginning? If this story moved you, comment where you're watching from and answer the quiz at the end. Get it right within 7 days for a chance at our shoutout post. Watching late? Answer anyway. We might still surprise you. And if you love this kind of emotional story, the next one is already waiting for you. Click the video that will show on your screen soon. We'll meet you there. Quiz. How many times was Jonathan Pierce mentioned in this story?